Okay, I think we are up and running. So good morning, hello and welcome to everybody. Welcome to this new series of webinars, which we're going to be launching and rolling out over the next couple of months. Today, we're going to be talking about how to manage your workplace pension scheme like a pro. And it's brilliant to see so many people who are on the webinar already, some familiar faces, and also some new people. So hello and good morning. And for those who have been watching live, thank you very much for taking the time out of your days to watch this. So hopefully everyone has had an ample supply of caffeine this morning and ready and raring to go. So let's go ahead and dive into things. So your workplace pension is a fantastic tool in your armory if it is managed correctly. It can help you build a successful retirement for your people whilst minimizing the risk of disputes and potential tricky situations as they might come to fruition. It can help you recruit and retain the top talent, thus making yourselves an employer of choice. And I guess it doesn't need me to tell people on this call today that it's potentially the biggest spend in your benefits package. So it is important that we get it right. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Mills. I head up the creative and comm side here at Lemonade, and I'm thrilled to steal an hour of time out of our managing partner's busy diary, David Pugh. So David has, I want to say, well over 20 years of experience working with some of the UK's top pension schemes. I hope I'm not doing you a disservice there, David. But you know, it's brilliant to have him on board today. So I'm very much in the sidecar this morning, and I'm going to be quizzing and asking questions as we go through. So good morning, David. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you, Dan. Looking forward to the morning.
Good. Okay, so once again, I would encourage everyone, if you look at the right-hand side of your screen, you can ask us questions. There's a chat functionality in there. So please do engage in the session as much as you can, and I'll try and ask those questions as we go through. Once again, if you're watching this as a recording, then please do get in touch. You can find myself on LinkedIn. Similarly, please connect with David on LinkedIn, ask any questions, or please do email us and we'll get back to you as best as we can. But over to you, David. Let's get this show on the road.
Thanks, Dan, and good morning, everybody. We're going to start off with some money saving strategies. Starting with an old favorite, salary sacrifice. I'm sure most of you have heard or even used salary sacrifice with or without pensions in the past. Simple concept, an employee gives up some salary for a non-cash benefit. So we've got an example on the right-hand side. Somebody earning £30,000 surrenders £1,000 to their pension. They save some national insurance, they're £120 better off, and the business saves some national insurance. So it's not rocket science. For one person, the numbers are small, but if you're paying £100,000 as a business into all of your employees' pensions, that can save you £165,000. So that's kind of a given, really. That's easy to achieve. But where we can add a twist is if we can engage your staff more thoroughly with their pension, if they can make some decisions that will move them forward, you actually increase this saving. We typically see an increase of 10 to 30% where employees engage in their pension. So there's advantages to the employee. It also helps avoid them put the pension payment on their tax return. And to the business, apart from this big saving, you can use it to increase engagement. And you may even want to give some of that saving back to the employee's pension pot rather than just add it to your bottom line. Now, whether you've used salary sacrifice before or whether you're launching it for the first time, just some simple tips that can help with this. Well, obviously, salary and sacrifice aren't two words most staff want to hear in one sentence. So just relabel it. We call it smart pension contributions. So save money and reduce tax. Just a twist on how to describe it. But don't just introduce it with a boring email, just saying this is salary sacrifice, this is how it works. Just brighten it up a little bit, make it a positive. It's not just about communicating it to employees though. You need to think operationally, how will it work? So make sure you get your payroller and pension provider together when you launch or relaunch this, because if you've got the figures in the wrong column, everything goes to pot. And we've often taken over accounts where we've seen this not working as it should originally, and that can create all sorts of problems in the past. You need to make it easy for employees. So whether you make it positive or negative affirmation, i.e. do you opt in or do you opt out of doing this? There's two ways of doing it. There's no right or wrong way. But you can introduce some choices and decisions along the way if that can create some better outcomes.
I think you're right there, David. Particularly that word sacrifice. It seems horrible, doesn't it, to the end user? So just changing that wording is definitely going to have an impact.
Yeah, without a doubt. Certainly change how people feel about it and any inertia you get when you launch. You want it to be positive feedback rather than why are you doing this? How dare you?
Yeah.
And often we hear HR professionals saying, all I ever hear about the pension is negativity, and people only come to me with problems. We certainly don't see that being the norm. It should and can be a very positive experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I introduce Alex? Alex is 28, on a good salary, just getting a basic auto enrollment pension contribution. So Alex pays 5%, the business pays 3%. What we're looking at in this chart is what Alex's future will look like if Alex works for 40 years for your business and then retires at the state pension age of 68. So in grey at the bottom, that's the state pension. And then in orange at the top, that's the pension pot being spent from age 68. And in this case, I'm just looking in, my eyes aren't great. The money runs out at age 83. And you can see life expectancy is age 88. So Alex is going to be 5 years short, or putting it a different way, Alex will live longer than Alex's pension. So not a great place to be. So Alex can do a number of things, but can I just challenge you as an employer, when did you last review the contribution paid to Alex's pension? Now, when we start working with companies, we normally find the answer is when auto enrollment came in, which could be more than 10 years ago for most companies now.
10
And
years.
the
Wow, that's
world's
gone by quickly, hasn't it?
it has a lot's happened though.
Yeah.
And certain kinds of pensions, defined benefit pensions, employers will be putting more and more money in. But the typical pension that we see in the workplace today, a group personal pension, we very rarely see an employer change the contribution. And that's a shame. But it is very expensive to change. What I'm modeling here is actually doubling the employer contribution. So that's a big ticket cost. In the previous example I gave, over £1 million being paid into the pension. Well, that's a very big, expensive choice to make, particularly in a time where people need pay rises. So if you said, actually, good news this year, no pay rise, we're increasing your pension, how would that be received? But in this example where the employer is doubling Alex's contribution, you can now see that the pension is going to outlive Alex. That's good news. You want the pension to live longer than you. You want the pension to last your lifetime. But is that really realistic for most employers at the moment? Now, there are some other levers that Alex can pull. Alex could play around with the contribution, where funds are invested, or when Alex wants to retire. Alex could retire earlier or later. So in this particular example, you can see now the pension lasts, is that 5 or 6 years beyond life expectancy, but we haven't actually changed the employer contribution. So I'm going to come on to explain how we achieve this. But in this example, it hasn't cost the business any more money in terms of what goes in, but Alex is getting a lot more out. So we're going to refer to this as the secret sauce later on, which can make a big difference. Okay. So there's a couple of ideas where we can effectively save some money or avoid spending more money. But Dan, can I pass back to you to cover scheme communication?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So recently I ran a poll on LinkedIn where we asked HR and kind of pension professionals, what is the biggest thorn in your side when it comes to workplace pensions? We can see that on the graph on the left-hand side. And perhaps unsurprisingly, there was an overwhelming reaction to education and engagement still being that main issue. Now, David, probably a question I'd have for you. If we asked that question 5 to 10 years ago, do you think we would have had a different response? I mean, from my point of view, I think it probably would have been there or thereabouts.
I completely agree. If you went back a little bit further, auto enrollment was the key thing because a lot of companies who never wanted to do a pension suddenly had to, and those that wanted to do it had a load of new rules to contend with.
Yeah.
But no, it's a constant theme that we see.
Yeah, and I think us as an industry, this is one of the biggest nuts we need to we need to crack and get this right. And when it comes to education and engagement, for me, it all comes down to effective communications. And I get that from the kind of HR side of things. Their comms isn't their day job. This isn't what they do. So sending out these blanket communications, I can see why they happen, and I can also see why they don't particularly resonate with people. But I guess the consequence of us not getting these this kind of area correct is that we can have people who are then sleepwalking into retirement. They're perhaps not sufficient for their needs, their goals, and their aspirations. So it is a key area we need to get right. And as we've got there on the right hand side, we've got some signals of what would kind of constitute as poor engagement. Now, all of you on the call on the webinar today can go to your provider and ask for an engagement report, so you can see how many people have downloaded the app, how many people have logged into the app. So that shows how engaged they are in the process. How many of those have actually self-selected funds, or how many are just still in the default funds that they, as David said, they might have been auto-enrolled into and not made an active change from there. And then also those who have filled out a deaf nomination form. So these are three kind of key indicators to see where the engagement is in your scheme. Anything you'd add on that, David?
I think there's many more signals, and different providers will give you a different depth of analytics. And you need to compare year on year, what direction are things moving in? Because sometimes you just see things happening and it can be a surprise in either direction. So yeah, just try and get as much data as you can, and then you can start to plan from there.
Yeah, and I think when we look at doing communications for a scheme, we have a kind of 7-step process, and perhaps we can do another session on this in the future, because there's so much to unpack when it comes to communications and the process around it. But as I said, data is a really, really key element. So in order for us to start sending messages that really resonate with our audience, we need to make sure that they're targeted. And the first step to targeting a message is understanding your audience. So we need to take the time to get to know what are the behaviors, what are the challenges, what are the characteristics, and what are the needs of our audience before we can start to communicate effectively with them. So, we've all been on different stages of our career. I remember when I was starting out in my career, lack of financial knowledge was probably right up there. Some might argue that it's still the same case today. But, we need to take all these things into account. Competing financial priorities. There's a tremendous amount of people who come into the workplace now who have got an awful lot of student loan debt still hanging over them. So, simply saying, right, we need to be saving more into pensions, and they've got these competing financial priorities. So we need to take all of those into account, and we need to make sure that we're resonating with that audience. And similarly, if we look at the other end of the spectrum, those on the road to retirement, they've spent their whole lives saving into this pension pot. They've got everything saved up. They can feel pretty daunted in terms of, okay, so I don't really understand what the next step is, or what are my options? How do I ensure that I'm making the right decision for the rest of my future? So we really do need to know what the characteristics are to make sure that when we are communicating, we're communicating in an effective manner. Once again, David, anything you would add on that?
Yeah, I think that the one size fits all approach is very quick, but it's not very effective. So just taking a bit of extra time, so much time, effort, money goes into these things. Not spending an extra few percent of that on the communications is a false economy, and it's less about money, it's more about time.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we come to segmenting communication, so we've got a bit of an example scheme here. So if we look in the top right-hand side, we can see the breakdown of the demographic of this particular workforce. Now, we've got some young workers, we've got some old, we've got some somewhere in the middle. But as we can see there, there's a massive proportion, 50%, in that age 40 to 54 category. Now, for HR, that might be ringing several bells in terms of, recruitment drives and other kind of initiatives. But we've got this potential retirement wave coming about. So these people are on the road to retirement. So a question for organisations is: do you have adequate retirement readiness and smooth transition plans? Because if we don't have our ducks in a row here, there is going to be an issue further down the line. And now that we know that audience, and we can go back and once again, we can look at our characteristics of that audience, those people on the road to retirement, we then know what information we need to be delivering in terms of educating them on the next steps of life. So that could be, how answering those questions. How do I make my savings last for as long as I plan to? David showcased that situation in the modeler. If someone does have a genuine gap, what are they to do about it? So these are all the things we need to be talking about. And in terms of delivery methods, in terms of your strategy, that could be done via workshops, presentations, webinars like we're doing today, online portals, videos, tools, ideally a combination of everything, because people learn in different manners. But hopefully that's a quick whistle stop tour to kind of put some meat on the bones in terms of get to know your audience, get to know the data, and then we can start to create that annual communications plan. And once again, lots of organizations still don't have an annual comms plan, do they, David? It's, as you say, it's send out those blanket messages and hope to change. But actually, we need to start targeting, we need to start segmenting the workforce and get the right information to the right people at the right time.
Absolutely. I love the little caption at the bottom: the best time to improve your retirement plan was many years ago. The next best time is today. It's so true.
Yeah.
There's no point waiting to the point of retirement then kind of wishing you'd done something. So that 40 to 54 age group, you really can make a difference if you start taking actions. It's never too late.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. Can I pass back over to you, David?
Yeah, thank you. I think you've done the fun bit. You left me with scheme management. Administration is always a fun one. We see some common challenges. So just listing out 5 things there. We've talked about the engagement and education. Compliance and regulations. It's not very exciting, but you can't ignore it. That's the one that you can go to prison for if you get it wrong. Employees, they have queries. What do we do with those? Administrative burden, all about processing, and then technology. So let's turn the challenges into a form of solution. So Dan talked about a few ideas on engagement and education. I would just suggest, you need to define your priorities, you need to create a plan, and ideally commit to that plan, but at least have a plan in place at the beginning of the year for 2024 and the years ahead. In terms of compliance, there's loads of things that have changed over the years, but there's always things coming down the track. So the latest things are the changes that will come through around auto enrolment. So the minimum age is dropping from 22 to 18. And for those that fund their contributions on band earnings, the lower earnings threshold has been removed. So if you use basic salary, you don't need to worry about this too much. But if you effectively don't use the bottom bit of your income and you cap it at the top, that formula is changing. I guess if you are using basic salary to definition, there is one important takeaway from this. When everyone else effectively has to up their game, you might suddenly be doing the minimum, whereas before you might have been thinking you're doing more than the minimum, and kind of what does that mean? So these changes are coming. We don't know exactly when they will be happening yet, but how do you keep abreast of them? Well, if you're like Dan and myself, we subscribe to all kinds of professional publications around pensions. It's not the sexiest thing to read. If you're working in HR, if you're working in finance, there's a load of other things you need to read. So how practical is it for you to read everything on pensions? If you're a full-time pension person, much, much easier. So, do you need any kind of external help on that side? Employees have needs and they have queries. That can take up time from your internal resource and it can lead to frustration. So just a little idea of having a dedicated pension email helpline, whether it's a phone helpline, an email helpline, just something that gets directed to somebody who can support that. And signposting is really effective. There's often a lot of information already out there, but has it been brought into one central focus? Do you keep up to date a Q&A? Just that those repeat questions or those things that happened in the past that people forget about, you have a conduit for managing that. I mentioned earlier about salary sacrifice and administration. It is all about the payments, calculating contributions, leavers, drawings, all these things are little tasks that hopefully have some elements of automation. But when did you last get HR, payroll, and your pension provider in a room together or on a conference call like this together and just talk about it? What's changed? It might be nothing to do with the pension that's changed. It could be a change in HR process or payroll process, but things just go slightly out of line. What does that mean? Mistakes happen or errors get embedded in the process, and then you deal with the consequences. Well, just spend an hour or two to think about the whole solution and the journey and how that's put together, and I'm sure you'll come up with some really neat ideas that can help each other, solve the problem before it's created a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Technology. I think pretty much every pension provider has a website. It might not be very personal to you, the client, or you, the employee, but can you link with an intranet? Can you create a dedicated page for your pension? Can you harness any modelers and tools and support you've got and just put it in one central place, so that if the employee who's looking at this once a year, rather than you, the professional who's looking at it more often, knows where to go, and I'm going to see the latest things in some kind of order that makes sense to me. So use technology, and that will help all of those other factors that we've gone through there. Dan, I'll throw this one back to you. Anything to add there?
No, I mean, obviously, being in the creative side of things, I love the fact that there's so much tech out there now. Just having, like I say, simple kind of websites and landing pages to house information, to host those call to actions, to further learning. I think they're brilliant. You can house videos, webinars. There's all sorts of things you can do with them. But for me, that kind of central hub that everything kind of is driven to. And once again, like we say, you can have your analytics, so we can see, okay, with our annual comms plan, how many people have we managed to drive into the website, and let's look to improve on that for the next year, etc. There's so much out there, and it's constantly moving. There's AI around the corner now, and how can we start to integrate those kind of solutions in there? So there's some exciting things which are being developed.
Excellent.
If not scary.
Moving on to scheme governance. A few years ago, this was kind of shaken up, and pension providers have a legal duty now to offer scheme governance, but you, the employer, it's optional. But we are seeing more and more companies, particularly as they grow and mature, kind of having a more formal structure in place to review the pension. Often that's through a committee. The relevance of that is it then means you can have a working group who aren't necessarily the executive, be more proactive in making decisions. Typically, you can involve HR, finance, they normally lead it, but you can then get different people from around the business, whether it's geographical, whether it's departmental led, whether it's opting in, or whether it's you select key people within the business who can bring their experiences, knowledge, but also their feedback from other members of staff, because we're always trying to make things better, and it's all about improving member outcomes or employee outcomes, getting a better pension scheme, a better pension outcome. Typically, you'd have terms of reference to define roles, responsibilities, and also limit risks to make sure that if I'm volunteering to be on a committee, that it's not on my head how your pension turns out. If you want to go and make some crazy decisions, that's on you. But my responsibility will be to help the committee come to a consensus, and that consensus will typically be put to the executive, who then make decisions. So governance committees don't normally have any deciding kind of powers. It's more to be a conduit and then present the options to those that can decide. In terms of what the committee can actually achieve, it can certainly help with costs. There's been a downward spiral on scheme costs, which is a positive. The less the pension provider takes out, the more the member, the more the employee will get to keep. And value's gone up. And that can be measured in different ways. We want to make sure that the pension providers' service standards are high. Do you have a dedicated contact for you, for members of staff? What is the performance to SLAs? What is the fund performance to default benchmarks? Are you in the right kind of default fund? And as we talked about earlier, are you measuring engagement in a meaningful way? All these things can be done, and it really doesn't take an awful lot of effort if you know how to do it. And then we're also seeing, and Dan, this is a change we've seen over the past 5 years, particularly a whole move towards ESG. So three different words that get connected: environmental, social, governance. And I think it's fair to say 3 or 4 years ago, we were seeing more firms align their pensions with their own values and that whole direction of travel, which transcends all the way through the business. But more recently, we've seen most default funds have a more ESG focus anyway. So you haven't necessarily had to go outside of where you would have naturally been if you're in a current default fund to achieve some of this. So it is moving, and I think the whole fund management industry is playing a bigger part in most companies moving towards ESG. But it's a whole topic for a different day. What is ESG and how green is green?
Yeah.
We haven't got time to delve into that one today.
It's great, and I guess it's kind of a reflection of society, because you see it in all walks of life that more and more people are moving towards that environmental, that social led initiative. So yeah, it can only be a positive thing, really, can't it?
Absolutely. And it's a great one to survey the audience on. So when you ask staff, how important is this to you?
Yeah,
Often you get quite binary answers. Sometimes it's, I just want my maximum returns. And other people are, well, what's the point of living if we don't live in a good world?
yeah, yeah.
I think you can have both. It doesn't need to be a binary decision.
Mm.
Okay, so moving on to the secret sauce, financial guidance. Why is this important? Well, ultimately, if you can help guide employees to achieve better outcomes, they're going to feel more assured. They're going to feel a greater sense of security and worth and value. And it will also help embed their longer term vision with your company, that journey they're going through and committing their life towards. It's about getting suitable investment choices. So the default fund is designed, for just an average scenario. It's not designed to be perfect for anybody or wrong for anybody. But when you talk one-on-one, or where you signpost people to more relevant choices, there are funds out there that over a longer period of time, a medium period of time, or even anything but a very short period of time, will achieve much better outcomes. But you generally need to educate people into those options. And it's all about maximizing what you're going to get in retirement. So creating the best financial future so people can do what they want, when they want, with whom they want. That's really my definition of getting a good outcome there.
I like that phrase.
So what's the most cost-effective way to help staff achieve their goals? Well, these are two of the images from earlier. We talked about, well, you can simply double the employer contribution, or you could just help employees make better decisions. And in option two, it's half the cost of the business, but the employee is getting a better outcome. Now, in this particular example, the employee isn't actually spending an extra penny in contributions. They're just making smarter choices. But you can't get to two without offering some really good guidance. And that can come in one of a number of ways. I think it's fair to say it's pretty unlikely you can attend one webinar and achieve that. You need to mix it with other things. But webinars, presentations, they can be the bedrock of helping dispel myths and just helping people see that there are other things they can think about and do. So that can be the catalyst for them wanting to go and look at a modeler, go through a portal and play with some tools. The best solution is always to offer an individual service, whether that's one-to-one or one-to-several or one-to-many. We can use tools in a workshop with the likes of Zoom, so that one advisor can guide a whole number of people using different tools, or the same tool. Each person's using it for their own scenario.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about communications. Nudge it is a great tool to push out little reminders. Sorry, excuse me.
Oh, come on, David. We planned for this. You're not allowed to cough and stop mid-flow in the webinar.
Well, we're just to date stamp the date. I live in Guildford. Guildford is without water for the whole weekend, so that's my first sip of water.
Yeah,
So
that's it.
we're
Make it
actually.
last for the rest of the day.
But you don't need a formal structure to send nudges. It just takes a bit of thought, part of the communication plan, doing that segmentation, and just sending targeted messages. It could be about bonuses. Have you thought about sacrificing some bonus? It could be around the annual allowance. It could be around, you've hit a certain birthday. It could be around you've just gone through your probation period. Just a little nudge with some actions that link from that will go an awful long way. We've talked about having a good set of Q&A. And I think as we do more remote presentations, it's so easy now to video them. If you do a live session, if you video it, unless you've got the BBC there to give you full film quality production standards, it's not going to be a very good experience to watch it secondhand. But where we're using Zoom and the likes of that, it's not as good as being in a live session, but it feels pretty much the same. So that could be a good outcome. So there's all these different tools and techniques we can put together. There's no one solution is right in every scenario. It's down to budget. It's down to how big the company is, how complex it is. But there are always solutions for any given situation. And we love working with employers who want to engage. They want to achieve better outcomes. And that's really what keeps us up at night and gets us up on a Monday morning to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about that mixture, isn't it? There's no one size fits all here, and as you say, often these things do come down to budgets. But it's about trying to maximize that engagement. And if we don't offer these types of things, then that nut which we spoke about earlier on trying to crack it, it's going to remain in place, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And even if you do the Rolls-Royce solution where it's all of that and everyone's off in an individual meeting, the cost of all of that is just a tiny fraction of what employers are paying anyway into the pension.
Yeah.
So again, if you're trying to get a better outcome, rather than just increasing what you're doing, just try and do a little bit, smarter with more strands to the bow. So just wrapping things up in summary, we like win-wins. So whether you're maximizing salary sacrifice or introducing it, don't overlook it. It's about targeting your messaging, but keeping it simple, keeping it relevant. Just improving your administration. It's a small investment of time to free up lots of time, but also to remove all that friction, all that aggro that nobody enjoys dealing with. Financial guidance, this is the bit that can have the biggest impact. In whatever form you're doing that, just challenge yourself. What more could you do next year? How could that be better? And ultimately collaborate. We have a limited opportunity to work with a few more clients. We are looking to expand in that area. We're not trying to take over the UK and look after everybody, but with those clients that want to do more, want to achieve better, we'd love to help guide you on that process. So collaboration's key, and that's not just about working with a pension professional. It's your pension provider, it's payroll, it's HR, it's finance, it's everybody working together to get that dream outcome.
Thrilled.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for your time today. Dan, anything to close?
No, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending. It's brilliant to see so many of you. If you do have any burning questions, like I say, please LinkedIn with myself, connect with David, ping us an email, and also let us know. We like I said, we're going to try and do more of these kind of series of webinars and make them topical for you, our audience. So I'm going to practice what I preach. So, I need to know from you guys, what is the information that you want to hear about? What is most relevant to you? What are the challenges that you're facing? And then we can perhaps look to help you solve them. But yeah, it's been brilliant. And look at that, we finished quicker than we thought we were going to. So so that can only be a good thing, giving people back some time in their day. But once again, thank you for everyone who has attended this morning. And yeah, look out for the future installments of the webinars.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.